So we're going to discuss um, three main tools that you can use to begin to understand what's going on in a particular set of data. And the first tool we've already talked about is the histogram. Okay, so we'll histogram some of these variables still, but I'll refer you to the previous lecture for knowing a little bit more about histograms. Okay, the first one that we're really going to go over today is cross-tabulation. Okay, cross-tabulation simply involves counting the number of instances that a given value for a specific variable appears. Okay. And this is implemented in Google Sheets using something called a pivot table. Okay. And so the easiest way to understand these pivot tables is to just play around with them a little bit. So let me show you how these pivot tables work. So let me refer to you. So I'm back in our class survey sheet, and I don't know why this is called pivot table 2. It should just be called pivot table. Okay. And you can see this. Why don't you have a look at this sheet? Okay. You might as well open it up right now. You're going to be using this sheet on your homework. Okay, so you can see I have this pivot table open right now, and right now um, there's not really much in this pivot table. Okay, the only thing that's contained in this pivot table is you can see this count of n. Count of n. Okay, there you go. What the heck does that mean? Well, you see, in our data, there is a column called n. Okay, and this n simply is basically an ID number for each person who participated in the survey. You can see that in total, 60 individuals participated in the survey. Okay, and so what's our count of n then? How many observations of this variable n do we have? We have exactly 60 such observations. Okay, so this is just telling us that 60 people actually participated in the survey. Okay, that's not very interesting, but we can make it more interesting. Okay, so you can see here, over here on this side of the screen, let me actually move my portrait over a little bit. I'll move my portrait down here so you can see it better. You can see here we have an option to specify rows, columns, and values. Now values I've already set up. We're not going to change this for now. Okay, but rows and columns, I currently don't have anything in there. So why don't we add something to the column field? Okay, and for now, let's just add sex. Okay, so I added sex. And you can see all of a sudden, the table is now breaking down our original count of n, 60, into people who answered either female or male. So you can see that out of the people who took the survey, there were 35 male individuals and 25 female individuals. Okay, let's try a different one. So to try a different one, we just X out that one. Just click a little X to get rid of that one. Okay, let's look at year in school, for example. Okay, so we can now see that there are 46 freshmen in our class, or at least a portion of our class who took the survey, 6 juniors, 2 seniors, 6 sophomores, for a grand total, again, of 60. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Putting it as a row or column doesn't really make a difference. So if I cross this out and instead I select that same variable as a row variable, you can see it just gives me the exact information, except it displays it vertically instead of horizontally. Okay. Um, okay. So so that's cool. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let me show you one more thing, which is that so instead of displaying these things as a count, we can actually instead display them as a percentage. Okay, so here, we have 25 girls and 35 guys, but if you wanted to know what percentage of people were male or female in our class, you can easily show that too. If you go down here to the values portion, okay, and you see how it says show as default. If you change that to percentage, and in this case we would want percentage of column, okay, because these values are arrayed in a column, okay, it's showing us that basically 40% of the women, 40% of the people in our class are women, and 60% roughly are men. Okay. Okay. So, okay, so that's a nice tool. It's a useful tool. But really what we're interested in, right, is not just tabulating an individual variable, which is what I've just done here, but understanding the relationship between one variable and another. Okay, so that's what I want to look at next. So suppose, for example, we were interested in, I don't know, the relationship between gender and any of these other variables in our data set. Like, for example, I don't know, let's see if there's a difference in whether or not you've tried an illegal drug based on what your gender is. Okay, so then what I would do is I would select um, one of those variables to go into rows, and I would select the other variable to go into the columns. So let's try that. Okay, so now I have sex as rows and have you ever tried an illegal drug as columns. And let me actually, instead of showing these as a percentage, let me go back to the raw count for now. Okay, so you can see what this is saying is that, okay, so of the 25 women in our class, 17 have not tried an illegal drug, 7 have tried an illegal drug, and 1 has a sense of humor and got the joke about this not inhaling, okay? If you're wondering who said that, Bill Clinton said that when he was asked whether or not he ever smoked weed, okay? Um, 23 got, out of the 35 guys in our class have tried an illegal drug, whereas 12 have not. Okay? So, okay, now, um, so in both of these cases, you can see that more people have not tried an illegal drug than have tried an illegal drug. Okay, but with just these numbers right now, it's kind of hard to tell whether gender is having an effect because we don't have the percentages, right? What we probably want to know in this case is what percentage of the females in our class have tried an illegal drug and what percentage of the guys have tried an illegal drug. So I'm going to set this now. I'm going to go back over here. Instead of saying show as default, I'm going to say show as percentage of row. Okay. And now we can see that 68% of the girls in our class have tried an illegal drug, whereas only 65% of the guys have tried an illegal drug. So it seems that actually a higher percentage of the women in our class have tried an illegal drug as compared to the men. Okay. Okay, let's try, let's look at a different example. Okay, we'll just do one more example. And I'll just choose something. Let's see, what would be interesting to look at here? On your homework, you're going to go through a bunch of these different examples, okay, and try to discover some things about our class. How about, okay, let's look at the relationship between, let's say how many meals you eat per day and whether or not you're a morning person. Where is whether or not you're a morning person? I just saw it here. Oh, here it is. Okay. So, okay, actually, let me take it one step at a time. We'll take it one step at a time. Okay. So if I just have how many meals do you eat per day, and I'm going to set this back to default so it doesn't show the percentages. Okay. You can see that, okay, this just breaks it down for me. Okay. So 3 out of the 60 people said they eat 1 meal per day. 28 said that they eat 2 meals per day. This is the most common one. And then 27 showed that they eat 3 meals per day. Okay, so this is people basically who are eating breakfast, I assume. Okay, and then 2 people put other. I'm not sure what this other really means. Okay, maybe 4 or 5 meals a day. Maybe you're just sort of a constant snacker. Okay, I hear that it can be healthy, okay, to eat a bunch of smaller meals. So if you're doing that, good for you, I suppose. So okay, so this is just the breakdown of that variable. Now, suppose I cross-tabulate this with are you a morning person or not? Okay, what would you expect the result to be? Well, if you think about it, right? I mean, it's sort of common sense that people who are morning people would probably be eating breakfast. And so we would probably expect that more of the morning people are eating 3 meals as compared to 2. Okay, so let's see if that's the case. I'm going to add, are you a morning person, to this pivot table. Okay, and you can see, so, okay, so let's look at the people who answered no. So of the people who answered no, I'm not a morning person, well, you can see that the majority of those people, the vast majority, eat only 2 meals a day. Whereas the people who are morning people, you can see that the vast majority of them, 14 of them, eat 3 meals a day, just as we expected. Okay. Now you might be wondering, what is this extra column here with this 1? What is that doing? Well, you see, it looks like one person simply didn't answer that question. Okay. So if we go back here to our raw data and we look at this morning person, okay, you can see that most people answered yes or no, but for whatever reason, this particular individual didn't answer that question. Maybe they just skipped it, or maybe they didn't feel like answering for some reason. Okay, and so this is actually, this column here, which is blank, corresponds to a response of nothing, or a missing response. Okay, and so that person is recorded here. That person didn't answer whether or not they were a morning person, but they did say that they ate 3 meals per day. Okay. Okay. So one more thing with this pivot table. Okay. So, well, actually, let me say 2 more things. So one is these pivot tables, okay, they're more suitable for analyzing at least in the way that we've set them up, they're more suitable for analyzing a categorical variable than a continuous variable. Okay. So they're more suitable for analyzing a variable that only takes on a small number of potential values. So let me show you why. So let me actually get rid of all of this, okay, and we'll go back to just breaking down a single variable. And let's break down, for example, college GPA, okay? And so, okay, so here I have the breakdown of college GPA, okay? And you can see that, okay, so this pivot table that I got going on here, I mean, this is really not that useful, right? Because look what it's doing. So it's basically just listing every single unique value of college GPA, and it's counting the number of people who put that answer, okay? So for example, there are 3 individuals in our class who have a college GPA of 2.5. There's 1 individual who has a college GPA of 2.58. Okay, well, this isn't that useful. Like, it's hard to look at this and tell anything about the data because there's just so many possible values. Okay, so in this case, if you were interested in the distribution of college GPA, you probably wouldn't use a pivot table. Okay, instead, what you would do is you would simply take this college GPA data, okay, and just like you did on your homework, you would put it into the sum stats sheet. And then you can look at the histogram, you can look at the distribution, and all of a sudden you can be like, okay, well, it looks like, for example, most people have a college GPA between 3.2 and 3.6. Okay, so these pivot tables, they're not as useful for looking at continuous variables. Unless, okay, we select something here other than just the count. Okay, so for example, suppose instead of, just looking at the breakdown of who has what GPA, I just wanted to know the average GPA in our class. Well, then, okay, so that we can do. So if I go down here to count, and instead of saying, sorry, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to X out this N entirely. Okay, so I'm going to X out the N entirely. And then for the values here, what I'm going to put is, I'm going to select college GPA as my, oops, sorry about that, guys. I'm going to select college GPA as my value, okay? So here is, what is your college GPA? I'm going to, instead of putting it as a row or column variable, I'm going to put it as my value, okay? So now you can see right now, the default is to summarize by sum. And so what this is, this number here, 180, this is now the sum of the GPA of everybody in our class. You take everybody's GPA and add it up, you would get 180. Okay, that's not very useful. I'm not interested in the sum. I'm interested in the average. Okay, so let me go here and select average. Okay, and so, okay, so now we see that the average college GPA in our class is 3.175. Okay. So, okay, now you go, I mean, why is that useful? Like, I mean, I could have just used the sum stats sheet to do an average. Okay, and that's true. You can just look at the mean here in the sum stat sheet. Okay, but putting it in the pivot table allows you to break down this number just as we did before. So for example, right, so instead of comparing the what the average GPA is in our entire class, I can break that down across any of the variables we just discussed. So for example, I could break it down by sex. Okay, so let me do that. So now if I go to rows and add sex in as a variable again, you can see now what's being shown is the average GPA of women versus the average GPA of men. And you can see that it appears in our class that girls have a slightly higher college GPA. Okay. I could do that by any number of things. For example, I could look at that by, let's look at that by, are you left or right-handed? Okay. And it looks like, hey, look at that. It looks like left-handed people have a slightly higher average GPA in our class as compared to right-handed people. Okay. That makes sense. I heard somewhere that left-handed people are like a genius or something like that. Okay. Let's look at, I don't know. Let's look at based on what's your favorite time of year. Okay. So it looks like people whose favorite time of year is winter, for some reason, have the highest average GPA as compared to the other three groups. Okay. Okay. So that's how you can look at averages. Okay. So you can do the count of a given variable, in which case you would just be counting, most of the time you just be counting this n variable here. Okay. Or alternatively, you can select a different variable to be the value that's being displayed, like college GPA. But if you were to do that, you would probably choose the average here. Okay. You would probably choose average in this setting right here. Okay. Okay. I hope that makes sense to y'all. That's the basics of how you use pivot tables, and you'll get a lot of chances on your homework to play around with that.